Hi, so I thought I'd make another video about narcissism today, a slightly more in-depth look at a few of the problems with narcissism, with human nature in general as well, why we tend to want to put people on pedestals who can sometimes be narcissists, for example, and some other tips as well. Narcissists often have tells that give away the fact that all is not as it seems, all is not quite right, a bit like a bad poker player. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that as well. So if that sounds like your thing, that's amazing. Pull up a chair, grab a coffee, and we'll see how this goes. So I wanted to make a video because obviously it's a real problem. Narcissism is a real problem, amongst other personality disorders as well. But one of the reasons it's so difficult is because the people who you think are narcissists are often highly manipulative. And that's one thing that narcissists share with sociopaths or psychopaths as well. It's like a dark triad. You're going to get high levels of manipulation, low to no emotional empathy, high cognitive empathy in some regards. That means they can fake it, they can fake emotion, but they won't feel it. They just don't have the emotional depth, they just don't have that capacity. A high need for control and coercive control will come into play as well, and they will mix truth with lies, or they will lie and manipulate and often gaslight as well. And the trouble is, some of these people can be quite charismatic. There's a sort of range of different subtypes of narcissism as well, some that you might not be aware of. So you can get the blustering, very overt types, like, say, Donald Trump, who may be a narcissist, you know, very much in love with his own ego. He's bought into the idea of who he is. He's bought into the idea of his own image. He's very vain. He's full of just bluster, perpetually tells lies, mixes lies with truth, just makes up his own reality, basically. And that would be perhaps a very overt, grandiose narcissist, potentially. But then there are also other subtypes as well. And some narcissists do not like the limelight. They don't like eyes on them. They can feel very uncomfortable in the limelight. In any regards, you might find that they're on social media, but without a profile picture, for example. They might really shy away from people looking at them and feel very uncomfortable. But they still seek power, they still seek control, they still have that manipulation, they still have that low to no emotional empathy. And there are various other types as well. That's just a sort of couple of those types. Some can be quite aggressive, for example. You know, and there's a range. When it comes to people who say, oh, but, you know, I'm with a narcissist, but they really do care. Well, some can really put a good show on. You know, that high level of manipulation again. They will cry, but they're not crying about you. They're probably crying about themselves, feeling sorry for themselves, you know. There seems to be new research coming into play which suggests that some narcissists can actually have high levels of empathy and actually be quite emotional beings, which adds a further layer of complexity into this. That research isn't necessarily generally accepted across the board. There's a lady on X called Dr. Karen Mitchell, and she's fantastic. She's been carrying out some research into that sort of dark triad of personality types, the narcissists, sociopaths and psychopaths. So she doesn't look at the individual types or their subtypes. She just lumps them all into that bracket because of these common denominators of the low to no emotional empathy, high levels of manipulation and a need for coercive control, and high levels of gaslighting under that bracket of manipulation, lying, you know, all of that. And she says that that in her research she has found that these people can be in all walks of life. And this is one of the problems for her that she's finding at the moment, is because she's exposing the fact that some quite high level people can be narcissists. So we're talking lawyers, doctors, teachers, other psychologists, which is why I think she's perhaps rattling a few feathers in her branch of research at the moment as well, because it's kind of like a bit of an expose that she's doing, I guess. She's looking at this idea that they can be infiltrated in any part of society. You know, we tend to think of the personalities like, say, perhaps Andrew Tate as a narcissist, maybe occasionally a leader as Boris Johnson or Donald Trump, again in this sort of almost pantomime way. But we don't tend to think of the people who just hold down regular jobs so much, who appear more like normal people in society that you wouldn't necessarily suspect at all. But people who, they need to be ethical, decent people, because they're in these positions which can sometimes be quite sensitive, such as psychologist. And you don't want to be up against that. If they are unscrupulous, have no ethics or morals, because ethics and morals are another other areas that these people don't have. They don't have any ethics or morals. When I think of a narcissist, I tend to think of them as like the queen on the chessboard. Not necessarily in terms of cleverness. They think they're more clever than they are, and we'll get on to tells in a minute. But in terms of the normal rules of society, they believe do not apply to them very often. And they can go anywhere, they can do anything, and they can say anything. And very often you'll see this. Some narcissists might be more prone to ending up in prison. But as I say, not all of them. Some of them can be quite high functioning in society, hold down normal jobs. You wouldn't want to cross them. But some of these people, what they will say will cross all boundaries, all reasonable, ethical, moral sort of boundaries. They just don't have ethics or scruples. So they think very differently to you. So if you're working your way diligently towards something, they could use a number of different tactics to get to the same place, to try to do it a bit quicker, potentially, you know. Some people really struggle because narcissists are very good at faking it. So they're very good at making out that they've got all these feelings sometimes. Dr. Ramani on YouTube put it in quite a good way when she looked at the sort of level of feeling that a narcissist might have for you. And she said, you know, a narcissist could be fond of you. I think it was her. And she said, a narcissist could be fond of you. They can be fond of you, a bit like you're fond of your iPad. But they're not going to feel the same love for you. They're not going to view you as a person in that way. So you're a bit objectified and thought of fondly, a bit like your electronic gadgets. But there's no real emotional depth there, as a good rule of thumb, you know, in the most part anyway. So these people can be so difficult to deal with. Very often they will use some highly manipulative techniques to get what they want, to get what they need. And if you are being love bombed by a narcissist, you'll never realise that they're a narcissist at the time, not really. And if you don't know what a narcissist is as well, you're in even deeper trouble. And I said this in my video yesterday, but to give a clear indication as to why, as to how it can be a problem trying to diagnose a narcissist, they will never admit it themselves. Sometimes they'll turn the tables on you in some way. So if you're trying to diagnose them or thinking that they've got a problem, they will counter by trying to say you've got a particular problem as well. Very often you'll find that they do this. Whatever is happening with you is suddenly happening with them, and they try to mirror you sometimes in this sort of regard. And I mentioned in my video yesterday about Dr. Richard Grannon. I say he's a doctor. He got a degree in psychology. I don't think he's a doctor. But he's been specialising in narcissism pretty much ever since. He's been around a long time making YouTube videos, and he's very, very good. He worked with Dr. Sam Vaknin for a little while, and then they sort of split up and went their separate ways. Dr. Sam Vaknin is probably the sort of senior, more learned guy who comes up with some very interesting ideas as well. But Richard Grannon is very good too, and Richard Grannon admitted very candidly in one of his videos in the last year or two that he himself had fallen victim to being in a relationship with a narcissist, and he couldn't believe it. He was very open, very candid about it. He didn't have to admit to it at all. So hats off to him for that, you know. He literally is in the business of warning other people about narcissistic behaviour, how to protect yourself, how to defend against it, how to spot it, all of that. And he himself fell prey to the machinations of a narcissist and ended up in a relationship with one. And, you know, I'm smiling, but it's not funny. They're that good sometimes at manipulation. And in the early days, it's very hard to spot. And one of the reasons it's very hard to spot is, of course, because your emotions are involved. If you're in a relationship with somebody, if you're starting out with someone, you have to make yourself a little bit emotionally vulnerable, right? When you start to decide that you're trusting this person, at some point, you have to start opening up. And so you let your guard down a little bit, you know, and it can be terrifically hard to spot because you are filled with all of the happiness of falling in love or whatever, getting involved with this new person. But what you don't know is that they are weaponizing, or they can weaponize, what you say about yourself, your own vulnerabilities, all of these things. This is the thing where these would be taboo areas that most people would leave well alone and have respect for. A narcissist will weaponize anything that is going to be a trigger point for you, regardless of how upsetting that could be. There are literally no holds barred to the things a narcissist could say at any given moment if they feel that they need to try and put some manipulative pressure on you. So I thought he was really, you know, really good to say that, really good to just say, hey, I also fell victim to, I had a relationship with a narcissist, didn't even realise she was one for a while, took him a little while, but then when he realised, he obviously extricated himself. That's the thing. Some people say, oh, but narcissists can get better. They get a really bad rap. They get a really bad, you know, reputation. But they're people too. They have feelings too. They're not as bad as they're painted out to be. The trouble is, if people say that, that's because they themselves have been manipulated. Narcissists are that bad. They won't seek help. They won't admit they've got a problem. They'll think they're the best human ever. If you try and approach them and say, I think you've got issues, then they will counter it by trying to elevate themselves in that moment and saying they've got no problem. They're amazing. You're the one with a problem. And either turn the same accusation onto you or a different type of accusation to put the heat on you and to get themselves out of it in some way. In other words, they're a bit of a nightmare. You know, it can be a real problem. So how can you identify them in some instances? Well, in some cases, they do have tells, because unless you're dealing with a really intelligent, off-the-charts intelligence, chances are they're going to be pretty run-of-the-mill, medium-level intelligence, and they're going to have tells. And the tells are because They believe so wholeheartedly in their own vanity, in their own ego, in their own idea of who they are, and they're trying to sell that to you, but you will be able to spot holes in their story. The problem is sometimes you will, but it depends on your psychological makeup as well, and what you want to believe, and who they are and who they are in society. There's a lot of different factors at play. So for example, if you've got a famous celebrity and they're quite sophisticated and they're very good orators and they can put on quite a show, chances are they've got quite the cult following. And then the problem then, of course, is that the people who follow them don't want to hear a bad word about them, because now they've sort of idolised them and put this person onto a pedestal. So there's a problem too in human nature, in our need to idolise other people, in our need to slavishly worship people, put them on pedestals. No one is worthy of that pedestal. No matter how amazing a human is, they're still human, still going to have flaws. They might be a lovely person, but they're still going to be having flaws. And if they're a narcissist, they're not a good person. They're not a kind person. So I say this because I'm going to use an example here of Andrew Tate. Now, I don't know if Andrew Tate is a narcissist or not. I don't want to smear anybody's name when I say this. But he seems to certainly present narcissistic tendencies that we might be more familiar with. The bluster, the swagger, the gigantic ego, the need to shout down his opponents. Things like this could be a good way of spotting that he's a narcissist. And what might then be the tells? Well, A, those mannerisms, which could be a tell, but also the things that people say. Listen very carefully and pay attention to the things people say with regard to measuring it against truth, because chances are when they're trying to do all this, they're trying to paint themselves in this elevated way, in this sort of hero position, chances are they're going to come up with some whopping lies, and you're going to be able to spot them, or even little baby lies. You're going to start to see the cracks in their veneer if you're looking, if you're paying attention. So, for example, Andrew Tate wanted to present himself as this sort of complete hero with regards to his fighting, regards to his boxing career, kickboxing. But if you look into his kickboxing career, you'll realise that he tried to get in with as much force as possible, as quickly as possible, because if he went the distance, chances are he wouldn't always win. He wasn't as infallible in any regard, in any way that he was painting himself out to be, But the swagger, and obviously there's always a bit of swagger when people are in fights or whatever, they're always having to big themselves up a little bit, But there was one little tell there, perhaps. Another one is in the stories that he tells about himself. So, for example, there's an easy one. So he told one story that when he was younger, he was in this chess tournament, age 9 or something, and that he won against a boy much older, So somebody decided to look into that and phone his old school and say, would this have been a thing? Would he have been set up with a much older person in this way? And they said, well, no, that just wouldn't have happened, So there's another easy one. All the swagger and bluster also means they can give themselves away if they've carried out any underhand activity, because they love to boast. The overt narcissists, in this way will love to boast. And so they often will give themselves away. If they've carried out any underhand behaviour, they'll probably boast about it in a particular way. And again, with Andrew Tate, and of course, everything that he has done over the years, very unsavoury with regards to trafficking women and his views on women, which are pretty obnoxious. Again, there are certain tells there with the way he tells stories. And if anybody thinks, oh, he's a really nice guy, you only have to go back and listen to some of his old videos. In his own words, he explains some of the tactics he used, and also those tactics themselves. in gaslighting these women and manipulating them show that he is not a nice man. You don't manipulate people and force them to stay in situations they're not happy with and use emotional manipulative techniques on them. That's coercive control, and it's really dark manipulative behaviour. And so the problem is with him, of course, is that he had quite the following of men, not just young lads, but also older guys who were old enough to know better, who have hero worshipped him. You know, I said in one of my videos a while ago, a couple of my male friends, one in his 40s, one in his 50s, both had a bit of a man crush on this guy and hero worshipped a little bit. Both of them should have known better. Both of them should have known better. But it's a problem. It's a real problem. Not being able to spot certain behaviours that are toxic because you want to believe in a person. You want to believe that they are all that they say they are, you know? And I think that's just a problem that we have in our psyche collectively as humans, that we want to believe in people, we want to worship people, we have this need to hero worship celebrities, we have this need for gods, you know. We can't take more responsibility for our own lives. We want a saviour figure. We're always looking for a saviour figure in some regard. And of course, Andrew Tate does talk a good talk. He manages to talk very convincingly for a long time without any ums or ahs. You know, he really is a fantastic orator. But as a human being, I would say he's a dark personality type. He is almost certainly deeply manipulative and a dark character in his own words. I say this because of his own words, not any accusations against him. If you pile those on too, you know, that perhaps deepens that sort of narrative a little bit. But just looking at what he is telling us in his own words, you know. Someone once said, if someone shows you who they are, believe them. And it's absolutely true. Give people enough rope and they do hang themselves. With these particular personality types, very often, they are not as good as they believe themselves to be. They're heroes in their own minds. And so they will probably slip up at some stage. You'll listen to them and they'll concoct a story and you'll think, well, that's not right. That can't be right. And initially, if you're not aware of this particular personality type, you'll find yourself second guessing yourself, which is a natural response. If you're around somebody who's lying and telling the truth sometimes and then lying again, or maybe being a bit manipulative, you're going to take a step back and at first you're going to think, well, is it me? Perfectly normal response. That shows that you're normal, okay, that you would seek to question yourself as well and not just immediately pin it onto them. You're going to go, well, they might be lying, but that would be weird, because if you've got no context, you don't know about narcissists, then you're going to think, why would they do that, right? Because you wouldn't do that, so you're keeping it within your frame of reference, which is you and how you would act. And because you're not bonkers in that way, you're going to really struggle to understand their motives. So the first thing is to recognise who they are. If you're pretty sure you've got a narcissist in your family, your partner, someone at work, etc., one of your friends, the first step is identifying them as a probable narcissist. You know, no one, I say in my last video, no one can truly identify a narcissist without them sitting in an office and a psychiatrist, which is true, but you can still have a damn good idea. You can get a really good idea that they are one. And then if they are, you need a whole different strategy to deal with them. So the first hurdle is you, because you want to be nice and you want to believe nice things about other people. You want to think that everyone probably is fundamentally a good person and a nice person. And so you'll think, oh, they wouldn't do that. That's really weird. That's really weird, you know? A little bit like, say, Munchausen's by proxy is a little bit weird. It's horrifically weird. It's a horror show. But again, when you first come across something like that, if you do, you're going to have no context for it. So you're going to think, well, no one would do that. No one would deliberately, systematically seek to destroy another human in that way. That would be horrific. That would be psychopathic. That would be evil. But they do. Some people do, you know. And similarly with narcissists, you think, well, they wouldn't seek to be so manipulative. They wouldn't seek to lie in that regard, and then to keep lying, and they would. You have to realise that your framework of understanding doesn't work when it comes to a narcissist. You have to put that to one side. You have to step into their framework of understanding. And I don't mean adopting any of their characteristics, but just in your mind, getting a handle on where they're coming from. And in order to do that, you have to start with a premise. They are not nice and they do not mean well. They might have flashes, they might have moments where they can act in a nice way, and that will throw you. They might have a moment of self-awareness where they go and they admit one of their failings, and that will throw you because they go, look, they're quite self-aware. I don't think they're a narcissist. These are just momentary lapses, if you like, you know. I feel like with a narcissist, and this is just personal opinion, but it almost feels like they're this sort of, they don't have one personality, but they seem to have a sort of conglomerate of multiple fragments that make up this sort of weird, incoherent whole. And so at some point you get this eruption of maybe a little bit of self-awareness or a little bit of being nice and things like this, but it quickly gets subsumed again in this overarching jumble of tactics, weaponization, obfuscation, manipulation, all the things that you don't want. They're the predominant traits of this personality type that are not kind and are not good. The moments of kindness they're showing you, probably not real. They're going to be kind to you because they want something. They're not kind to you just for no reason. They don't do anything usually without a reason and an overarching objective. So if a narcissist is being nice to you, that's because they want something from you. So identify what it is that they want. You know, it could be a need for control of a situation. It could be because they have an end game, which is control over a much wider situation. It could be all sorts of things. But if they're being nice to you, you're being targeted and there's a reason for it. It could be because they see you as a weak link. They want to get to someone else. You know, there's a reason for it. There can be other tactics too, such as subtly undermining you, especially in the workplace, but maybe with family members or things as well. Who's being your friend and who's not being your friend? So, for example, if you were to get a job promotion at work and you go home and you tell a family member about it, hopefully you'll just get support and people will be on your side and they'll say, oh, that's amazing, well done, you're going to be great, etc. A narcissist might say something like, oh, I don't think you'd be very good at that. I think you're too sensitive. I think you should stay in your position that you're in now. What they're looking to do in that moment is put you down, make you doubt yourself, try to make you feel vulnerable in that moment. That gives them that position of hierarchy over you. Remember, they're usually seeking control and power. Those are the underlying principles at work. If you're in a position where you're stronger, especially if this is a family member who's older than you, in a position of some level of hierarchy over you, if you are, say, taking on a promotion at work, this is like a bid for power. It's empowering yourself, right? You're becoming stronger in yourself. A narcissist won't want you to become stronger in yourself. A narcissist will try to keep you small and try to keep you dependent upon them, okay? So if something like that happens and they're going, yeah, I don't think you'd be very good at that. I think you're, say, highly sensitive, or, yeah, I just don't see you in that role. these are clear indications you've got a serious problem and that you need to back away, grab your crucifix and start watching some videos or reading books about narcissism. There are many other little ways as well in which they might try and subtly undermine, so watch out for those. So again, you know, back to, say, a workplace scenario, you might find that they phone up one of your colleagues and just make a little subtle insinuation about you that you're not very comfortable with. It's a bit of a red flag. You know, they might just say something like, oh, you know what she's like, meaning you, trying to undermine you. And maybe she says that to one of the people who work for you. And so it's just a bit inappropriate and a bit of a red flag. Pay attention, note it down. You've got a problem person, you know? So it's like a rivalry, but it's more than rivalry. It isn't a friendly, sparring type of rivalry. It's the sort of rivalry where they want to put you down. They want to undermine you. They seek happiness through keeping you small. They seek a level of hierarchy over you, you know, in order that they are more powerful, in order that they are the sort of person in control. Because if you become more empowered, you won't need them. And they want you to need them. They want you to rely on them. Because that could be useful for whatever reason, you know. And likely, if they're in that position, there's likely an end game there, you know, that they want to be in this position of seeking control and power over you in that way. So pay attention, pay attention. If you hear things like that, if you hear things and you just think that's made me uncomfortable, but maybe they're trying to laugh it off, and then maybe you confront them over it and they'll say something like, oh, you're so sensitive, I didn't mean anything by it, I was just joking, etc. Don't let them belittle your feelings. Don't let them undermine you or devalue your feelings. Your feelings are there for a reason. Chances are your gut feeling just told you that there was a problem there, and there is a problem there. Listen to your gut always. Your gut feelings will never let you down. If you feel uneasy, you feel it in your gut. Pay attention to that. You know, these are really cunning characters, and so you need to be aware. In some cases, they can concoct whole lies, elaborate fantasies and elaborate stories. And this is where it can get really quite peculiar as well. So, for example, in one of his videos, Dr. Todd Grande on YouTube talked about how a narcissist at work, for no good reason other than she wanted to be in the centre of attention, decided to key her own car. And then obviously create a fuss about it. Oh my God, look what's happened to my car. Someone's keyed my car. How terrible. Decided to hold a sort of witch hunt and start accusing her work colleagues and creating a massive fuss and asking her bosses, etc., to start interrogating her work colleagues because someone had keyed her car and she was furious and all the rest of it. It didn't go the way she wanted it to go. Obviously, somehow it was discovered that she did it herself, which is a really peculiar thing to try to come back from and try to save face or, you know. But she literally went to those lengths to get attention, which is extraordinary and completely baffling unless you start to understand narcissists. And then you realise what seems an extraordinary behaviour or set of behaviours and what seems really weird and completely out of context for a normal person fits into their framework. This is why getting inside their framework of understanding, having a bit of knowledge of it is so powerful, because when you do, you can realise that no, you're not going mad, it's not you, you're not imagining things, it really is them. They really are that bonkers, okay? They really are that batshit, and it's worrying, it's difficult. And this is one reason it's so useful to get the hell away from them where you can, you know, because otherwise they can literally drive you mad, because you spend so much time. You spend so much time thinking about them, trying to work out, is this real? Is that not real? Did they really just do that? Or am I going mad? Am I losing my mind, you know? This lady that Dr. Todd Grande talks about further compounded things. By then, at that point, and I might have got the stories the wrong way round, but she further compounded things by then saying to people a family member had died, and then receiving lots of flowers at work. Fine, you might think, except that a family member had not died. She completely fabricated the story and sent herself the flowers, again in this massive bid for attention. She wanted people's sympathy and she wanted people's attention, and she wanted to play the victim for whatever reason. And she left the company shortly after that. And Dr. Todd Grande talks about this very matter-of-factly in one of his videos, as I say, on YouTube. But those sort of machinations, that sort of level of scheming, can be normal for some narcissists. They will concoct elaborate fantasies and try and drag other people in them. Fantasies in which they're the victim, in which they've been wronged, something has happened, and maybe the police will get involved, you know, etc. And in some of these cases, they will have done these things themselves. Completely insane behaviour, but as I say, kind of normal to a narcissist. And this is the sort of thing you can find yourself dealing with and up against. And at some point, you might feel like you're in a game of whack-a-mole, because they will come up with one lie and you're dealing with that and firefighting that. And then they come up with another one over in another corner. And then you're dealing with that and firefighting that as well. It's a really unhealthy place to be in if you're in close contact with a narcissist. So the best thing you can do for your own mental health is develop a strategy whereby you walk away if it's a partner, but do it safely. Obviously, if you've got a narcissist who's a bit aggressive as well, make sure you are safe. Go to authorities if you need to, you know, get the help that you need. And obviously, if it's a work colleague or a family member, then it's a different strategy that you need. You need a strategy for your mental health where you protect yourself and try and get other people on board as well if they are invariably trying to gaslight you, but also manipulate other people into believing lies about you as well. And this is one reason it's so deeply problematic if you get narcissists in positions of power in any way, shape or form, be they psychologists, judges, lawyers, doctors, teachers, social workers, anything like that. Because you need these people to be on board, you need them to be above board, you need them to be ethical and moral and decent. And sometimes they're dealing with people who themselves are quite vulnerable and who will need their help. And so this is where Dr. Karen Mitchell's research comes in to a world of its own, I think, and comes into a really, you know, a really good place, because she's just looking at this and exposing it, and a lot of people don't want to be exposed. So she's getting some criticism. And when you look at the people levying the criticism, it's like, oh, you know, there are some people out there who are not good people, and they're in powerful positions, and it's a huge concern if anybody criticises the status quo. So if you're interested in psychology in that regard, I would recommend going over to her page as well and checking out her research, which I think she links to on her page. So that's Dr. Karen Mitchell on X. And I think it's going to be really, really good research. Really, really good research. I think there are still some myths out there about various personality types. Psychiatrists don't get it right in every regard, I don't believe. And obviously some findings can be contested by other psychiatrists in some instances. But I think her research is going to be very, very welcome. and very powerful. I think, you know, she notes in one of her posts on X that there's a lot of outdated research on there that they use for diagnosing some of these people. So in some cases, the research itself, the tools they use to measure, potentially need to be updated in a big way, you know. So there's that as well. So these are cunning, manipulative, coercive, dark personality types. She just, as I say, her research is simply about the dark personality types because it's dark behaviour, it's coercive, it's underhand, it's unpleasant, it's deeply worrying, it's manipulative, it can cause untold emotional distress in some cases, maybe in some cases physical distress as well, psychological distress. And so know your enemy. Definitely know your enemy. And look out for the little tells as well. You know, with regards to some of the more flamboyant ones out there, the bluster and the lies, you know, we'll look at Donald Trump, for example. The bluster and the lies. But again, the worry is that because he stands there so confidently in himself, he has a small army of believers, doesn't he? He has this cult-like following of people who will worship him no matter what he says. You know, that's a flaw in the human condition that unfortunately supports these people getting to the top. You know, they love power, they love control, they seek out these positions, but they're enabled by the sort of psychological makeup of an average human that wants to believe in someone. And the more difficult perhaps the economic conditions are, the more people tend to swing to the right. They want somebody to stand tall confidently and be assertive and tell them what to do. The more frightened people are, the more they want the same. They want someone to stand there, be the hero and tell them what to do. Horrifically dangerous territory because you are just opening a door to all the bloody dark psychological types out there and saying, come on, lead us, it's fine, we'll believe in you. You know, that isn't what people want to do. That isn't what they imagine they're doing, but that is exactly what they're doing. And so the world stage at the moment obviously is really quite peculiar. You see some really swaggering grandiosity and narcissistic type of behaviour from various people. You know, I've talked about Andrew Tate a little bit, obviously, but on the world stage, you've got you've got Donald Trump and you've got Elon Musk, who doesn't seem short of narcissistic traits himself. He seems to believe in his own ego a little bit too much. He seems to be a little bit too vain and have some quite funny ideas in some regards. You know, he seems to be enjoying the power a little bit too much. And obviously the old adage proves true as well. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. We are fallible animals. Human beings are fallible. And the more power that you have, the deeper the shadow that you cast. The shadow is that you start to believe in your own hype. If you start to believe in your own hype, you are sunk, you know. But unfortunately, you might take a few people out with you who also believe in your hype too. So listen to your gut feeling. Pay attention to gut feelings. Pay attention to what happens around you. Is this person a threat? Have they got something in it, you know, against you? Are they trying to manipulate other people against you? What can you do to counter all of this? Develop a strategy. Go to a trusted person and talk to them. If it's in the workplace, you might need to get HR on board. Part of the problem as well is, of course, that because these personality types are so very devious and so manipulative, and sometimes they have such elaborate schemes, and yet they can also be convincing and very suave or sophisticated in some instances. people tend to believe them, and people tend to not believe you, because if you're saying all of these things, you're saying, but look, they've come up with this elaborate scheme, or they're doing this, or they're doing that. People are not necessarily going to easily believe that if they themselves have had no experience of narcissists or other dark personality types. They're just not going to know. And they might find themselves disbelieving you. So get evidence where you can, obviously safely and legally, but get everything in writing where you can. Get evidence. You might need to leave a relationship if you're in a relationship with a narcissist. And this, to me, also shows why we need labels in some regards as well. There are some people who are keen to try to remove all kinds of psychological labels and say, well, labels can induce stigmatism. They can make people feel marginalised, or, it carries a stigma with it. Labels can also help identify a threat. They can also help identify a problem. They can also help identify problems that can get fixed. They're not there to create a sort of othering of part of the population. They're not there to denigrate. They're not there to belittle or to make other people feel better than someone. They're there to show a deviation from what we consider normal, and in some cases, how we can help those particular people, and also how we can help ourselves. Labels are important. Labels are useful. For example, it's only now, I guess, that we're starting to realise that there are so many neurodivergent people out there that workplaces are not always suited to them. Sometimes, for instance, if you're working in, say, a call centre environment, there's lots of busy things going on around you. Well, to an autistic person, that would be hell. So they need a different environment. If you're in the right environment, you thrive. A guy made a YouTube video on that yesterday. He's an autistic person. And he made a really good point that put people in the right environment and they will thrive, no matter what personality issues or whatever they've got. Yes, of course, you're dealing with dark personality types that we don't really want to thrive at the expense of other people, because that would be their definition of thriving. But we are learning more and more about neurodivergence in all sorts of ways. So much important new research out there. And what that does is, if you've got a label, it helps empower you, I've recently come to think that I'm a bit ADHD. Well, that's empowering, because now I've got a framework to understand my own behaviour and I can work with that. It's actually empowering because I'm learning more psychological tips to help myself that I just wouldn't have had the framework for. I'm almost 50 and I find it incredibly empowering, uplifting and inspiring to hear the stories of other people with ADHD, because now I'm not alone and now I have a framework to understand myself. So an idea of a framework is very, very important. But yeah, this isn't to belittle anyone with narcissism, You can feel sorry for the person underneath, because I believe narcissism, you're not born a narcissist, and no two people are alike in terms of if they have the same upbringing. One person might become a narcissist, but the other person might not. It's all to do with your individual makeup as well as environmental factors. But the way I look at it, and again, this is opinion only, but based upon some of the videos I've watched as well, I get the impression that narcissism is like a self-defense mechanism. Kids who become narcissists will do so because possibly they felt threatened, they were under threat, and they had to lie in order to not feel threatened anymore. Now, no, maybe that isn't across the board. Maybe in some cases it was more about manipulation rather than just acting out of fear or feeling threatened. But I do tend to see it as they found their environment threatening in some way. And so to counter that, this small child develops a strategy of lies and manipulative behaviour to get what they want and to get themselves out of trouble. And then as time goes on, those behaviour patterns just become the norm. They become deeply sort of embedded within their psyche, and it becomes their sort of fundamental operating system, which is a huge problem because now they're older and the world around them has changed, their environment has changed. They no longer need to use this highly sort of maladaptive approach in a normal environment, because you don't have to just go after what you want in such sort of darkly manipulative ways. If you work with people in a cooperative way, chances are you'll get what you want because people will be glad to give it to you because you're helping them too, and so on and so forth. And so you can develop actual, real, solid, proper friendships and relationships. But they won't, they can't, and they don't understand that. And that's the other thing about a narcissist as well. They might have a few people around them. They might be quite popular or gregarious, but they probably won't have true, real, deep friends, And if they are in relationships, again, these relationships are never reciprocal, not completely. The narcissist can never give of themselves to another human, not in any deep, meaningful way. They just can't do it. They don't have the capacity. They don't have the range of feelings, but they don't have the makeup. They don't have the psychological makeup to be able to give in any sort of altruistic or kind way to just do something nice for another person. They wouldn't know what that looks like or what that is. As I say, if they're doing something nice for you, it's because they want something from you. So all of that sounds like a lot, and it is. It's heavy and it's hard and it's difficult, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. You are not alone. If you think you have been targeted by a narcissist for whatever way, seek help. Talk to people, talk to trusted people, get the help that you need. You're not alone. And if you're in a relationship with one and you're really feeling that it's such a difficult thing, but you love this person, etc., definitely seek help. I'd recommend going to a psychiatrist or a psychologist or whatever you need, probably predominantly a psychologist or a counsellor, but make sure that they are aware of narcissism and do a bit of research there as well, I would imagine. Remember that if you're being belittled at all, if you're being gaslit, belittled, manipulated, you don't have to put up with that. There's no obligation. Sometimes, especially if it's a family member, you might think, oh, but they're family, oh, but they love me really, oh, but they're family. Again, they can't experience that deep level of love for you. And family or not, no one has the right to belittle anyone else. No one has the right to try to undermine how you feel, to try to make you feel less than you are. No one has the right to try to manipulate you, to try to force upon you a different take on reality that simply isn't real, to try to lie, to try to undermine, to try to manipulate, to try to make you feel less than good, less than human. If anyone is making you feel these things and making your life a misery, please, please, please seek help and know that you are a worthy, lovely human. And the problem is not you, it's them. And if they have taken away your confidence, if you are second guessing yourself, if you are looking around worldly for help, if you are starting to believe that, no, you're not good enough, no, what were you thinking trying to get this new job, etc., no, you couldn't possibly do that, no, you're not good enough, take a step back. Yes, you jolly well are. You're going to be fine, but you need to get them out of your head and start listening to yourself, coming back to your own power and empowering yourself. Remember, they have the power to get into people's heads to the extent that even a person with a psychology degree who specialises in narcissism was not able to see through a narcissist in the early days of his relationship. They're not infallible, they're not gods, but they are bloody cunning. They're not as clever as they think they are, so they have tells. that you can spot, but they're still very cunning and they're good at that emotional manipulation. So just seek help, definitely seek help, and do what you have to do in order to come back to yourself. You know, it really is okay to leave a family member alone if they are constantly getting into your head, constantly belittling you, constantly putting you down, and it's damaging you. You don't have to put up with someone abusing you. No one has the right to abuse anybody else. You are a lovely human and you have the right to not be abused and to step away very reasonably and say, I'm sorry, that's abusive behaviour. I deserve better. And just make that break. It can be the hardest thing in the world to do. You know, the hardest thing in the world to do. And, you know, if you need to, you can have pity for the child that they were, that felt the need to develop this sort of persona, this fractured, broken personality type that they now cannot help but use upon the world, and it keeps them away from the world. It keeps them away from developing true, decent relationships with people because, you know, they're their own worst enemy now. They can't help it. They can't help but carry on being this person in the world, and that's really sad and it's broken, and you can have sympathy for that if you want to, absolutely. You know, they can't help it. They're a slave to their own psychological makeup now. But that still doesn't give them the right to do that. And it still does not mean on any level ever that you have to put up with that. You do not ever have to put up with that. You have to do what is healthy and good for you, which usually means probably 99% of the time getting the hell away from, developing a strategy against, coming back to yourself, maybe seeking counselling or whatever to build your confidence up again if you need to, and to make peace with the whole thing, you know. Raging against them is no good either. They know how to push your buttons. So chances are there have been moments where you have been so angry because they've got inside your head, they've got inside other people's head and manipulated them against you. And you may find yourself full of anger. So you've got to work through that anger, come out the other side. And if they are living rent-free in your head, if you are spending a lot of time thinking about them, how angry they make you feel, how annoying they are, etc., you've got to get past all of that as well, right? Because they are living rent-free in your head. Don't give them that satisfaction. Live your own life. You know what they are now. You know what they will do. You know they can be that annoying. And you know that they have to be that annoying. And that leads me to one more point that I'm going to make in this video. And that is to say, they often do this. They will push buttons. They will say the most provocative thing. They can be audacious as well, actually. Very often, Dr. Karen Mitchell notes this as well. The audacious lies. The lies that are so preposterous and weird and mental that you think no one would try to pull off. They'll pull those off. Yeah. But the other point that I wanted to make was simply that they know how to push your buttons, and they do it because they have to. Because you know what? The most terrifying thing in the world for a narcissist is silence, is your silence. They need attention. They want attention. Even if they don't seek the fame and fortune in a conventional way, even if they don't like people looking at them, they still want attention. Attention is what gives them life. It's what animates them. But it can be good or bad. They don't care. It seems to be that for most people, you want attention from people that's nice. You know, you don't seek it, but you like nice feedback. For a narcissist, they will seek it and they don't care if you're angry at them or if you're pleased with them. Obviously, if they've got a particular strategy in mind, they're probably going to want to butter you up at some point because they want you to be pleased with them. But equally, if they've made you so angry that you are just hopping about in absolute incandescent rage, it makes them happy, okay? Because in that moment, they've won. They know that they can still get under your skin like that, and that makes them happy because then they're still relevant. Okay, as sick and twisted and mental as that sounds, I believe that's how they think and they feel. They know that you care about them and that they've made an impact in that moment. So to them, that's literally everything, you know? So bear in mind that when they're saying some of these things to you, some of these provocative things, some of these ways in which they've used your treasured memories, say, of a loved one, and they've just casually tossing it out there like it's nothing, they're doing it to make you angry on purpose. Because if they're living rent-free inside your head, then they're still relevant, then they still matter, then they're still getting that attention that they crave. Okay, so bear that in mind as well. So these are deeply problematic people. It goes without saying. It goes without saying. And if you are stuck in a situation with one, my heart goes out to you, and I'm just sending a hug with this video. Okay, definitely seek help if you can get help, and know that these manipulations, there can be light at the end of the tunnel. There can be light at the end of the tunnel, but you will need help. You can't believe their lies, because sometimes they will be very convincing. They'll say, oh, I've changed. I wouldn't do things like that anymore. And you might go, oh gosh, well, maybe they have changed. Because again, you're coming from your framework of wanting to believe. They haven't changed. They can't change. And it's tragic and it's sad. So do the grieving that you need to do, but move on. And you can send them love from a distance, and then let them go from your mind and live your own life with great love and joy and as much happiness as you possibly can. In one of her videos on YouTube, Dr. Ramani says that a good strategy against a narcissist is to go grey rock. And I think Dr. Ramani is lovely. And she comes up with some fantastic advice. Grey rock is literally what it sounds like. You give them no attention, you give them no information, because they're usually seeking information as well, again, so they can use it against you. So you just go grey rock. If you engage with one, they'll use it against you. You're engaging, you're playing in their playground now. You're on their playing field. Don't engage. So they could come up with a really provocative statement about you and make up a preposterous lie. And you're going to want to defend that against that lie, right? You're going to want to say, no, I don't do this. No, I've never done this, etc. But if you go down that route, you're in their playground. You're literally in their playing field. You're now defending against this thing. You're in there, in their arena. So you pull them out of their arena into your arena by don't engaging. Just don't engage. Don't engage. Let it go. Let the preposterous lie go. Just shrug, let it go. Don't give them any information. Don't give them anything to cling on to further use against you. And so I'm going to, again, leave this list of names. I'll put it here as well, but I'll leave it in the comments. And it's literally Dr. Ramani, Dr. Todd Grande, Dr. Sam Vaknin, Richard Grannon. If you want, someone on X, Dr. Karen Mitchell on X as well. All those other guys are on YouTube. Really amazing, a bunch of YouTube videos. They've got so many out there. So good. And there are other people as well. There's one guy who's ex-CIA who just gives some very good tips for psychology as well, just dealing with people, dealing with really difficult people and strategizing. And I think if you're in a working relationship as well with anyone who is like this, who is very manipulative and difficult, you do well to get onto a course, to find a course for how to deal with difficult personality types and manipulative personality types and things like this. And again, you'll probably find loads of resources for that all over YouTube. If you want a more light-hearted take on it, in a way, there's a guy on YouTube as well called HG Tudor. And he's very good too. He is a self-confessed narcissistic psychopath. So you can't trust him either. But in terms of he knows his stuff, and he comes out with some quite interesting, unique takes in some cases on various celebrities and puts a case forward as to why they might be a narcissist and breaks down some of their behaviours as well, which is very, very interesting. Again, if you've got an interest in psychology, you might find him quite interesting there as well. So finding out that information, finding out information about a narcissist is key, because then you can arm yourself with knowledge. You can arm yourself with knowledge, and that's step one. And that really will help, you know, especially if you are emotionally dragged into this for whatever reason. If they've guilt tripped you, you know, all the rest of it, because they will, as I say, they'll use whatever they can. If they have to guilt trip, they can do that. Gaslight, they'll do that. So you're going, I don't think that can be true. I don't think I did that. They can even gaslight you about things that you yourself have not done, you know, and tell you that you've done them. And, you know, I haven't seen the old black and white film Gaslighting yet, but it's on my list of films to see, because I imagine it's going to be, you know, pretty good in terms of that sort of thing. So, yeah, don't lose heart completely. You're not alone. You can come through this. But definitely try and get some people on side. If you think, you know, as I say, if you think you're falling prey to being targeted by one of these people, definitely seek help, because they're out there. There's loads and loads of these people just running around in society, and other dark psychological types as well. And there are various other difficult disorders as well. Of course there are. I say in one of my video yesterday, actually, Dr. Ramani made a point that there might be other subtypes or other sort of lesser known psychological disorders, personality types, that could also fall under this greater umbrella of narcissism, such as histrionic personality disorder as well, because that's a sort of much lesser known personality disorder. But again, you're going to find you've got these traits of narcissism when you look into that as well, potentially. So I really will leave it there for now. You're not alone. It is a difficult, really difficult thing to deal with, if not one of the most, you know, because of the emotional manipulation and all of that as well. It can be a nightmare. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. Seek help. Luckily, there's so much information out there now that help should be available. And you will come through this, and you will come through this stronger as a result as well. So take a deep breath. You're going to be okay. It's going to be all right. And I think I'll leave it there. So yeah, take care. God bless, and have a fantastic weekend. Take care. Bye.